I sure hope they didn't catch that belch on the open because of the delay.
Yeah.
Anyway,
No.
hi everybody. It's a Thursday. It's the 13th of February. I am Joe Chaffee, and welcome to the Joe and Joe Weather Show.
Yes, welcome indeed. Welcome from Putnam Valley on this end and over in Long Island on your end, I guess, right?
Yep.
Had a coating again, Joe. Third time in the last week we had one of these like mini snows up where I live, and my deck got coated and my daughter's car got coated. But that's about the only thing that got coated because when I woke up this morning, it was raining, and there you go.
Yeah, the only surprise today, I think, was the temperatures. They didn't even get out of the 30s here, which was a shock
Right,
to me. I mean,
right.
it got to about 40 or so, but for most of the day it was 38, 39. And
Yeah.
you had to go down from southeast Pennsylvania southward to get into the upper 40s or a little bit higher. But even in areas down in the south, it didn't quite warm up. And I think that was because the nature of this was really pretty much sort of like a flat wave that went by. You never really had like a good solid warm frontal push trying to move up, or a deepening low going up to our west to kind of pull up that warmer air. It just never happened.
And I actually apologized on my own short fused update from earlier on today that I did during the mid and late afternoon. First thing out of the box is I said, what a disappointment, because and I know you too, were anticipating temperatures closer to 50 today, and we were nowhere near that. In fact, upper 30s to around 40 is what I had, and a few of the people up on my chat board, like Dennis Cassie in Connecticut, he too was in the upper 30s. So not so great a day today. Now, tomorrow, it'll be a colder day. It'll be a rather brisk day with a gusty northwest wind. But at least one thing about tomorrow that we did not have at all today is sunshine and dry weather too.
Well, yeah, I mean, 3 out of the 4 days this week have been just
Yeah.
utterly depressing and dismal. So yeah, the sun will come tomorrow. I also think that the cold, it'll get cold tomorrow morning. By morning, we'll probably be down, near or just over the freezing mark or just under the freezing mark. But the real cold air comes in during the day tomorrow and into tomorrow night. So temperatures are just going to bottom out where they bottom out tomorrow morning and kind of sit there for most of the day. And then we head down to the single digits and low teens for Saturday morning. This will be the coldest. This is going to be the coldest day of the month of February, more than likely. It's also going to wind up for most places. It's going to be the coldest day of the winter, such as it is. But we haven't had a day like this since back December 18th, December 19th.
Right.
Because after that, we the pattern flipped, and that was the end of it.
And may I make a notation here? And I put this on my Facebook page last night, just before 11 o'clock. And I'll read this verbatim and let me get your impression about this. I wrote, jumping around with the remote this evening and noticing that in the promos for their respective 11 o'clock newscasts, that the local stations, all the local stations, are leading off with stuff like rain tonight, and yes, snow too, and then bitter cold for the start of the weekend. And of course, any snow for tonight, now this is last night now, will probably change quickly over to rain and not really accumulate much, if anything. And the bitter cold is a far cry from what a true February blast of cold weather really is. But in order to try to get you to tune in, the stations try to lure you with hellacious weather outlooks. And it reminded me of when I was the morning drive meteorologist back in the 1990s for a couple of years at 1010 Winds. And the winter in one of those years, it was either 94 or 95, was pretty much like the one we're experiencing right now, relatively mild, not much in terms of any snow, and I actually was called in by the station manager of 1010 Winds, who sat me down and said, look, you've got to understand that when we have really big storms and lots of snow, our ratings go through the roof. So we really like it when we have lousy weather. And he was talking to me almost as if I could control the weather and I was the one responsible for holding back on all the snow. So, how did I respond to somebody in upper management? I just looked him straight in the eye and I said, I'll do my best.
Yeah, I did see your post. It's We live in the world of apocalyptic teases. I just wonder if we ever get if it ever happens again, and it will. We just don't know when. But what if we have a stretch like we did, for example, in February of 1979, where we went 3 weeks, 3 weeks where nighttime lows were in the uh, low teens, single digits, and below zero, and daytime highs that barely got back into the 20s. But that was a 3 week solid stretch of bitter cold air that went from the very end of January and then culminated in the President's Day snowstorm of 1979, which was a big snowstorm basically from New York City and western Long Island, south and west, down to Washington D.C., Baltimore, those Philadelphia, those cities got hit very hard, and even down into North Carolina. But can you imagine? Can you imagine what they're going to do in terms of teases? And the other thing is, so nowadays, and they open shelters up for folks, and I'm not, I don't want to get into politics of that. They open the shelters up for some folks when temperatures get down into the 20s. Okay, and you and I know that years ago they didn't really do that, but you didn't even really describe bitter cold temperatures unless it got down into single digits or below zero. Now the threshold of pain apparently is when the temperature gets below 32. And you know what? I can understand that for Florida. I can't understand it for here. It is a bit ridiculous to let's say over apocalypse everything, because one day you're going to get something that's going to be newsworthy and noteworthy, and uh, gee, I mean, how you going to describe it when it happens?
Well, the normal in the lower Hudson Valley now at this time of year, the normal low temperature is around 23 degrees. And if I'm looking at my the 7 day outlook that I drew up, and I got 6 out of those 7 days at or above 23. And in fact, I even have a wait a minute.
Bless you.
That's the first sneeze of the
Of
of
the
the
new
3 days.
year.
Yeah. Um, I have 6 out of the next 7 days at or above that 23-degree reading. In fact, I got a 37 for a low for next Wednesday night. There's only one day that stands out, and that's tomorrow night and Saturday morning when I have a low of 7. That's it.
But look
That's
back in the last 6 weeks. How many days did we actually even go down even close to the normal low?
right,
So
right.
yeah. Uh, this shot comes in, it goes out, it's here for 2 days, and then it's gone. Sunday we bounce. Monday we sell off a bit and go back down, but not nothing too crazy. We've just had 4 waves of low pressure go by, starting from the major storm from last Friday and culminating with this is the last one. So now it looks like we're going to go into a bit of a quiet stretch. At least we're going to get 4 days with no precip, which
Right.
is a plus.
Yes.
Uh,
That'd be nice. It's nice to see the sun again for more than just a day,
yeah,
But
yeah.
we'll have blue skies and bright sun tomorrow. We'll have bright sun on Saturday. Sunday, I'm thinking, Joe, that as as we just noted, it's going to warm up quickly. We've got 2 days of seasonably cold weather coming up for Saturday and tomorrow. And as the push of milder air comes in, I think we're actually going to see some clouds come in Saturday night and into the first part of Sunday. So Sunday may not start out so bright,
I
but
agree.
then as the atmosphere kind of, gets accustomed to the milder air at all levels of the atmosphere, the clouds will go bye-bye. And then from later Sunday into Monday, we'll have basically fair, clear weather.
Yeah.
So
Actually, the
I think,
bounce is going to start Saturday because once we make those lows, I mean, we're gonna go back up. I think most areas are going to make it either close to 30 or even into the low 30s by day's end. This cold shot just goes in and out so quickly. There's no
right,
support for it. There really isn't. It's just like kind of a renegade shot of cold air that's coming down, and the upper air is just not. It's totally hostile to holding any cold air masses in here at all. And yeah, so it warms up fast, and Sunday evening, Sunday night, a little secondary front comes through, but the air behind that front is actually not as cold as the air that we're getting for tomorrow and Saturday. But we will chill down a little bit. But you're right. You're right though. I mean, outside of we'll get some clouds on Sunday. I think from that warmer air coming in so fast. Then the clouds will disappear to a large extent, and then Monday should be fine. So if you've got plans for the holiday weekend that hinge on whether it rains or snows, you're not going to have either to worry about. So you're good. Now, I want to take a look, Mr. Rayo, because this fire hose jet in the Atlantic and this super strong upper air winds and these waves have been moving off are having consequences out to the east. And I want to just bring up the North Atlantic GFS. I actually backed this. I'm using the wind, the 10-meter wind map, because I can back this up 3 days. So I'm going back to Monday when the first wave, actually the second wave, because last Friday's major storm was the first one. So the second wave was going through, and of course, that front stalled out, and then there was another wave that came up for Tuesday, making Tuesday a miserable day for most. And then, of course, we got a little break yesterday, and then we had the system for today. But if you watch as I move across, this wave from Monday moves off of Newfoundland and becomes a storm that goes straight over to the British Isles, and that made landfall on over Ireland on Wednesday night. The low from Tuesday impacted Newfoundland and deepened pretty rapidly, got down to a 971 near Newfoundland, and then it's getting really wrapped up now down to a 937 low on the analysis at 2 o'clock this afternoon. And you can also see the beginnings of the final wave here that is following this storm. And as we roll it out, you can see what happens to it. The first major storm that heads up towards Iceland just kind of moves up, rotates around to the Greenland coast. The second low deepens to a 937. That becomes the main system near Iceland as a 915 low Saturday morning. And then after doing this counterclockwise loop, it swings east and passes just north of Scotland Sunday night. So it looks like some really stormy conditions in terms of winds are going to be moving into England and Ireland and Scotland here. I want to bring up the map of Europe. So if any of our friends in Britain, Ireland, and Scotland are watching, they can let us know what forecasters there are talking about on the chat board, which you can do that by just logging in with your Gmail account. But take a look at this, Joe, in terms of the wind field here on the GFS with this 945 low, sustained winds of 40 to 50 knots, all the way down into, oops, let me turn that. Let me just get that there. Hang on. Sustained winds going all the way down into the Irish Sea, and you've got the purple there, 50 knots or higher, just offshore of Northern Ireland and off the coast of Scotland. I mean, they're going to just get really hammered with strong winds. And as far as precip is concerned, we'll give them a look at what the GFS says the radar is supposed to look like. You've got waves of rain here that they're dealing with. The first wave is coming through now with the low that's heading up toward Iceland, so the big occlusion swings around. And then the second one swings around for Saturday in a big way. That moves out. And then finally you get the strong low with another round of rain and some snow in the highlands, of course, and that continues into Monday. So some very stormy weather definitely heading for England, Ireland, and Scotland.
Amazing. Yeah, I used to listen. I was very big when I was a teenager, listening on short wave to like the BBC and other European countries, and occasionally on their news, a major weather event would occur. Nowadays, I don't think you'd have to do that. I guess you could listen to one of the BBC stations, one of the frequencies on your computer. And I'm sure that in the next couple of days, the weather is going to be one of the big highlights in the United Kingdom and England and Scotland and Ireland. Be interesting to hear, about them talking about winds of, sustained winds of 50 to 60 kilometers per hour. No, 100,
100,
100
100.
kilometers per hour. Yeah.
Look at the fire. Yeah, I got the I brought the 200 millibar map up for Saturday morning, Joe. What a fire hose out in the Atlantic. It's a straight
Look at
line
that.
shoot with 150 knot plus winds. The planes are going to be. If you're flying from Atlanta to London, you're gonna make it there in record time. I would not at all be surprised. And even if you're flying from New York to London, you're probably going to make it there, if not in record time, close to it, because the record was set. What was it, last weekend when that
Last,
with that
I
flight?
think, yeah, last weekend, I think. So it's incredible. Uh, it's like, you get on one of those flights, and in that Twilight Zone episode, The Odyssey of Flight 33, not a few of the passengers, as well as the pilot in the cockpit, making the comment that you could literally feel the speed of the plane, the unusual speed of the plane, and I'm sure that that's probably going to be the case for people who are on board any of those flights. They're probably cutting anywhere from 90 minutes to 2 hours off of their expected flight time.
Yeah, and if we look, I brought down the 500 millibar map so we can look at the winds at roughly 18,000 feet, and here we are on Sunday. And you notice, folks, if you look at the upper air winds, it just doesn't stop here. It's straight west to east across the Atlantic. One of the things you want to see in some fashion is you'd like to see at least some troughs out here with storms. We talk about the fact that when you've got storms out there, it creates for interesting scenarios along the East Coast because systems get backed up. They can't move straight east, so they try to find different ways and different paths of least resistance develop, and storms start turning up the East Coast. Well, that's not going to happen in a pattern like this, in this really just super fast flow, because everything is moving so quickly from west to east. It's one of those rare times, Joe. When I explain about weather, talking about upper air winds, the winds in the atmosphere basically blow from west to east. But the reality is that it seldom blows from west to east. You have variations of that. Sometimes with these deep troughs, you're going to have areas in that flow where the upper air winds are going to blow north to south, and then on the other side of the trough, south to north. So it's really unusual to take a view of the northern hemisphere and see west to east winds from the subtropical regions all the way up into the Arctic regions. This is one of those rare moments where you're not only seeing west to east winds, but it also sets up the atmosphere in a way where all the cold air is locked up. As you go further north, I guess what I'm trying to say is that there's a symmetry to the winds increasing in a regular fashion as you go further north, so that if you were to look at a profile of the surface temperatures, all the 70s would be in a straight line down south, and then the 60s and the 50s and 40s. There's no amplitude here. You don't have warm air shooting up the East Coast and cold air driving southward through the plains down into the southern part of the United States. It's a very, very kind of symmetrical atmosphere, and that's just not really conducive for the East Coast as far as getting winter weather that lasts anyway.
So, in other words, a striated temperature field, so to speak, in the zonal flow, where
Yeah, right,
it's literally like stacked up one on top of the other on top of the other.
right.
There's
And
no, yeah.
zonal flow is a big, is basically for weather enthusiasts is a fairly boring pattern unless you're maybe around the Great Lakes and you can get some lake effect, or if you're up in the north, if you're up in the northern tier, the zonal flow works for you at times. It doesn't really work for everybody else, but that's the way it is. This is what we have. This is what we deal with. And going forward, I'm looking at this, and I really every run I kind of look and see, is there a hint of something that a little different? Is there a hint that something's going to change? And when I take a look at the upper air once again today, I'm going to just run through it real quick. It really not much changes. If you see where all the blue is that shows up, it's all up in the Arctic region. So that's where your polar vortex is and where all your cold air is locked up. The only thing I did notice, Joe, is when we get to once again in that day 10 to 16 time frame, it looks like the strength of the polar, well, it really doesn't. I guess maybe I should rephrase that. But I don't know. It gets a little bit more, I don't want to use blocky necessarily, but the upper air does look a bit more messy in a sense after day 10. And maybe in a situation like that, it might open up some opportunities. Once again, late in the forecast period, you get a little bit of a Canadian connection that comes down with some colder air. But we've been down this road so many times in the last 6 weeks, and hardly any of it has come even remotely close to coming true. So, I mean, it does look kind of blocky if you technically when you look at the end of the forecast period, if it were to ever look like this. But guess what? It's February 29th now on the last day.
That's right. Leap day, February 29th.
You get an extra day of torture this year.
Yeah. Well, Joe, I'm looking at the European ensemble, which takes us all the way out to 360 hours. And from my perspective, after this little shot of cold weather in the next day or so, we may get another little shot along about Thursday of next week.
Right, I agree with that.
And then that bounces out. And then after that goes by, it really looks fairly flat and mild, taking us right on through the end of the month. There may be something trying to build over Hudson Bay by Leap Day, the 29th. Whether or not it's able to build enough further south and east and invade the northeastern part of the country for the early part of March. I mean, that's just pure speculation.
Right, and this is and the GFS today on its runs kind of does the same thing. So we've gotten so used to this viewing all of this with a high degree of skepticism on a normal basis. So we have to really look at it at even more higher degree of skepticism given the way the winter has gone. Just real quick, in terms of what's going on now, I mean, you look across the country, there's a minimal amount of winter weather advisories up in parts of the Rockies, the northern Rockies, and in the Northwest. It's all about wind chill advisories up around the northern plains and the Great Lakes, where temperatures are going to be dropping down well below zero tonight in some places. And we also have heavy freezing spray advisories up for Lake Superior at the U.S. side of Lake Superior and Lake Huron.
Wow.
I mean, that's thrilling. And wind chill advisories and some wind advisories. No, those are special weather statements. I'm sorry. Right? Or they are special weather statements, aren't they? They should be. Yeah. For upstate New York and for parts of northern New England, like you need a wind chill advisory for northern Maine. I mean, really? And the rest of the country is quiet. You can see clouds, by the way, the back edge of the cloud cover now approaching eastern Pennsylvania and the middle Hudson Valley. So those clouds will be sliding southeastward, so we should see improving weather conditions soon. The northwest and the southeast, the only spots right now seeing some weather as the rain has moved out. We've got some lake effect stuff beginning in southwestern New York, in northeastern Ohio, and northwestern Pennsylvania. Big yawn there. And just a quick look at the temperatures here. I'll bring up the forecast low temperatures. for Saturday morning. So up in Maine, for example, you're looking at numbers that are going to be in the -15 to -25 range, even a -31. I don't know what point that is southwest of Caribou, but they got a -31 print there, -20 print up in the Adirondacks.
Could be Presque Isle.
Could be. Looking at 0 for Albany, we're looking at about 14 for White Plains, 7 for Poughkeepsie, 12 for my house near Islip, 11 at Trenton, 14 at Philadelphia, 19 at Baltimore, 20-ish at Washington, 22 for Washington, D.C., and low 20s clear down into the Carolinas, Eastern Tennessee, mid to upper 20s as you get into South Carolina and Georgia. So this is definitely going to be a cold shot of air, and that's it. So, you know, it's pretty, Joe. It's so darn quiet. It just is.
Not doing much of anything, Joe. I'm not sure though.
By the way, raise your camera. Your
Oh, I'm sorry.
we could see your eyebrows.
I just it just shows you how bored I am. I'm just like, as time goes on, I'm just slouching more and more down in my
Yeah, in
in
your
my
chair.
chair. Ah,
Well, bring yourself up a little bit there, a
bring
little
myself
higher.
up.
No. Now we could see your nostril. Now I could see your. No, now you're going the other. You're
How about if I
going.
go back this way?
No. You're. I, we can only see from your nose up.
Really? Well, what
Yeah.
happened here?
Now you're good. Yeah, your camera must have
There we
sunk.
go. All right.
Even your camera's bored and falling asleep.
Yeah, it's true. It's sad.
Let's just real
But
quick. Go ahead.
I think when I think back, Joe, to let's say the last 8 or 10 years, and we had some pretty wild Februarys, snowmageddon winters, and I know a lot of you who are winter weather lovers would love to see that happen now. But you know what? For somebody like Joe and I, we used to run back and forth when we were in television between the studio and back to the weather center and then blah 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 blah. It's kind of nice. I'm sorry to say this to all of you snow lovers, but it's kind of nice just to not have to be concerned or worried about any major type of storm that could cause problems on roadways and problems for homeowners and whatever.
We also don't
It,
have to drive in it anymore.
right, right,
Um,
exactly. But my kids, and I know your girls, my son, my daughter, they're out there driving, and you get a big storm, and you get concerned about their welfare. So it's nice and calm. What can I say?
yeah, no, I know, but yeah, and it's actually it is a bit refreshing. It's just if there was stuff going on elsewhere around the country, we'd have a little bit more to talk about. Should bring up, by the way, that Scott Briller, the chairman, left the live stream early because he has to take his mom to the doctor. She's getting ready to uh, have. I think she's having double knee surgery coming up in another month or so. So do what you got to do and send her our best. And let's see, did he leave? I think he left me a Briller Jeopardy answer. I gotta bring it back up, so just give me a moment. In the meantime, Chuck Cardillo, who's 3,000 feet up in the Catskills, has a foot of snow on the ground. So I guess somebody benefited from that slightly colder air, Joe, that didn't hung on because I got a picture. He sent me a picture earlier today uh, showing me the snow there. He had a nice solid snowfall.
I don't know what happened to me on your. All of a sudden, what am I looking at? I'm looking at a train.
Oh, okay. You're on. I'm on another screen. I'm using my other screen. I'm trying to bring up. I'm
That's nice. I mean, it's nice to see a train. The
no,
Cannonballs,
that's on
right?
that's on my Patreon page. That's the cover shot on my Patreon page.
Oh, okay.
Um. Okay, so we do have a Briller Jeopardy here, and the Briller Jeopardy is okay because it's Valentine's Day tomorrow. Um. 2016 Valentine's Day. What stands out about 2016 Valentine's Day?
Well, didn't
And
we
your
just
and your camera went did it again.
Oh, well, what am I looking at here? Or what are you looking at?
Oh wait, hold on. No, no, no. I brought the Jeopardy question up. Now you're back. You're fine. You're fine.
Oh, okay.
Oh, you were fine. Now you're sunk again. I forgot
Joe, you
because
gotta stop
I
it
I
here.
forgot. So once I when I pulled up the Patreon screen, that showed up over you. All
Oh,
right. Now we see your teeth a little bit more.
how about if I just get up like
Well,
this?
why is your camera moving like that? You said it said
I
okay.
don't know.
There you
There,
go.
how's that?
You might have to
How's
tighten it. Yeah, it's kind of sinking. You might have to tighten something. Okay, you'll do that
that?
afterward. So, Valentine's Day 2016 stands out for this one particular reason in New York City.
I mean, weren't we coming off of the great 2016 snowstorm, the one that broke the record, the which we only broke like 10 years earlier, or
I believe so. And what
20, 28
2016?
point something.
Right, but 26 on Valentine's Day was the last time this happened in New York City.
The last time it happened. Well, let's try this. Zero. Last time we got down to zero
Minus one.
in
Minus one. Last time we went to
my,
below zero.
okay, so that was 4 years ago.
Right. So subsequently, I actually got into an argument with somebody that I've subsequently blocked off all my social media platforms because I actually I did forecast the temperature to go below zero in New York City, and he was of the opinion that New York City would never see below zero temperatures ever again, and I've already beat him twice on this. So anyway, I beat him again, but since then he is no longer with us. Now your camera's gone. What are you doing?
I just no. What I just did is I put the lens cover on because I'm moving it to a different position.
Yeah, it
So this way
seems like
we
it
have no.
just. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
So
how's that?
well, we see your eyes. It's point. That's it. Now, if it could just hold there and you hold there,
Yes.
we're good.
Yes.
All
Okay.
right. So we're good. So that was the last time it hit below zero in New York City was in 2016, minus one.
4 years.
Yeah.
We're about due, aren't we? Maybe we'll do it next year. It's not certainly doesn't look like we're going to be doing it this year
Yeah, the
or
long
this.
long trips in between the dips and long trips to the well in between. You know what I'm getting at whatever
Right.
that saying is, because
Right.
wasn't it 1994 was the last was it 1994 the last time it got to below zero in New York City was minus two, or did it do it again sometime in the early 2000s? I forget.
I don't remember that. I do remember 1994. I remember it was a place in northern Jersey in 1994 where it got down to something like 36 below zero,
Right.
something ridiculous. And New York followed suit with not 36 below, but below zero, just below zero temperatures. Um, so it doesn't happen very often anymore here in New York. And again, without any snow cover and without any appreciable blast of cold air being advected in here from northern Canada, it ain't going to happen this year. It doesn't
Well,
look like it's going to
and you
happen.
know when I someone mentioned to me about the other day with the New York City's all-time low, which was what minus 15 in 1934,
Yes, right.
that it would never happen again. And I just cautioned that. I just say never say never because that setup. If you go back and you look on that site that shows you the algorithm, how the algorithm figures out the upper air, that was a
Right.
really weird setup. That's something that probably happens maybe once every 100 years anyway. So I wouldn't. I'm not saying it'll ever get down to minus 15 again, but the setup that caused that to happen, we haven't seen a setup like that since 1934. So if that setup ever shows up again, who knows? Maybe we will see double digit below zero one day in New York City itself. We definitely have seen it around New York City since, but as far as the city is concerned, that was it. So you just got to you have to wait for an absolutely bizarre setup for it to happen.
Now, Steve LaPont is saying Central Park, Manhattan. Then he put in parentheses WABC. Now, my assumption is that WABC, or maybe Lee Goldberg or whoever's on WABC tonight may have said this. Valentine's Day of 2016 going down as the coldest in New York City's history. The the low temperature Sunday dipped to -1 at Central Park
Right.
in Manhattan.
Yes, but I'm thinking he was referring to the coldest Valentine's Day because it was not the
Right,
coldest day in his. It's not the coldest day. I think he means the coldest Valentine's Day.
right. The low temperature Sunday. I guess in 2016 Valentine's Day fell on a Sunday.
Now I was up in northern New Hampshire that weekend, so it was minus where I was. It was -15, and the wind chill was down to -40. And I've said this
Wow.
many times. I don't care what anybody says. A wind chill of -15 and a temperature of -15 are two different things. Okay,
Yes.
and then you add the wind to that. It's not a. It. I guess it is a religious experience because you get so cold, you get to the point where you ask God to take you.
Yeah. Yeah. It's horrible. It is horrible. I've had problems circulation with my fingers. Like they literally feel like they're. And then you go inside, and I put hot water or warm water on the fingers, and they hurt even more as I try to thaw the fingers out. Ouch. Oh,
I know. Jeffrey Mara pointing out 2002, 3, and 4, and he's up in on coastal Rhode Island. My friend Jeff DeNoyer does weather at the ABC station in Providence, and I saw something he posted the other day talking about the fact that, or maybe it was maybe it was last week, but just talking about the fact that the still waiting to take out the coldest, not just the coldest temperatures, but it's usually routine for temperatures to get down into the low teens and single digits in Rhode Island in most winters, and they hadn't accomplished that yet. So this is going to happen for them Saturday morning too. They'll see their temperatures down in the low teens and single digits. So this cold shot covers the Northeast. It goes away, and as far as snow lovers are concerned, nothing really has changed since nothing has changed at all. So in terms of the outlook, so we'll just have to come back tomorrow and see. Maybe we'll come back tomorrow. We'll see. But I'm thinking of taking tomorrow off.
now David Scott said that, gents, correct me if I'm wrong, but Martin Luther King Day 2019 last year had lows of -2. I I I will say this: the night before, it was bitterly cold with the temperatures were, no, it couldn't have been -2. At Central Park, I don't think that was the case because here in Putnam Valley, I know that late into the night we were still at like 10 degrees.
Well, go ahead, keep
Very,
going. I'll check.
very, very strong winds. We had wind chills probably sub-zero. The wind chills were sub-zero, but I don't think the actual ambient air temperature last last year on Martin Luther King Day got to below zero, at least in Central Park. It was
January 2019.
January 20th, 2019.
All right, hold on. I'm bringing it up now. Uh, January 20th. Central Park got down to 4 on the morning of the 21st.
Okay.
On the 30th, got down to 6. The 31st, it got down to 2 above on January 31st. And then February, just going into February of last year, the lowest temperature for the month of February last year was on the 1st of February, 11 above. And, then after that, it was pretty ordinary going forward for the rest of the month. Nothing too unusual. But yeah, that was one of the few cold shots we did get last winter.
Right.
And that was the last one, apparently. So, because I'm looking at these lows, I mean, it got a little colder than normal around the 18th, 19th, and 20th. A bounce back for a day, then seasonal to slightly above or slightly below. The month finished cold, but nothing unusual, 20s and 30s. And snowfall for the month was 2.6 inches in Central Park last year in the month of February.
Right.
So
We had two moderate snowfalls back to back in the early days of March that accounted for over 10 inches, I think, at Central Park. those two storms were the highlights for snow lovers, I think, last year. And we had to wait until March to get it. So who knows? Maybe
Okay.
this year we'll have to wait until April.
All right, to correct, February of 16. So it got down to -1 on Valentine's Day, but um, that was not the February. There was only 4 inches of snow for the month that of February that year. There was a 1.4 inches the next day on the 15th, where the high temperature actually was 35, and then it went to 54 on the 16th. So talk about quick shots. So the lows on the 11th, 12th, 13th, 14th, and 15th were 18, 15, 6, -1, 13, and then on the 16th the temperature was 54. We had an inch. It looks like it was a snow changing to rain because we had about 1.4 inches and then an inch of rain on top of that. And then you have to go back to February 5th when we had 2.5 inches of snow that accumulated. So,
In 20, the big snowstorm in 2016 was not in February. It was in mid or late January.
let me
Not
check.
till that.
So January of 16. Yeah, that was the year. That was the El Nino year. 27.3 inches on the 23rd.
Right, right.
Right. Now I will remember that in February some of those snow events on Long Island though were much more productive. Just for the record. So
Of course, because you're there.
exactly. All right, so you know what? Let's wrap it up because I'm tired, you're tired, and we're running out of things to talk about.
So tomorrow night, no Joe and Joe.
I think we'll take a break tomorrow night, and I guess we could also take a break on Saturday. So we'll come back Sunday morning. Does that work for you?
Yes, coffee and tea with Joe and Joe.
All right, so folks, we're going to take tomorrow and Saturday off because there really isn't going to be too much to talk about. So unless something happens out of the ordinary, we'll be back on Sunday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern time with our regular Coffee with Chaffee show.
My good,
Coffee with Chaffee and Rayo.
and by that time, the cold wave will already be behind us.
Exactly,
Yeah,
exactly. And it'll be bounce day. We'll have temperatures heading up well into the 40s.
correct.
All right. Have a great night, Joe. Everybody, have a great night. Thanks for being here, and we'll see you Sunday morning.